Democrats just tried to pull another hoax on the American people. We'll call this the Trump was involved in sex trafficking with Jeffrey Epstein hoax, or just the Epstein hoax for short. And part of this hoax was Democrats trying to get the American people to forget that they shut down the federal government for 43 days, which accomplished absolutely nothing except punish their own voters. And the American people learned throughout all of this that 42 million Americans are on food stamps. This caused many taxpayers to wonder, am I the only one buying my own food? This Democrat government shutdown cost our economy $1.5 trillion and risked the lives of Americans by forcing a reduction in air traffic controllers. All this for the purpose of making Orange Man look bad. So the Democrat shutdown of the federal government backfired bigly on them. So to distract you from this, Democrats launched this new hoax, the Epstein hoax. And from the propaganda media, we saw headlines like this: the Epstein files could finally sink Donald Trump. And here's what Democrats have been telling America about all this.
You know, it seems as though Donald Trump had a very close personal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and that he had personally spent time with victims in the Epstein operation. And I think that this is just, it's horrifying. It's horrifying.
Democrats are telling us these emails are a bombshell. A bombshell, I tell you. But actually, these emails turned out to be a nothing burger, less than a nothing burger. Actually, kind of proved that Donald Trump is not a bad guy, a much better guy than a lot of people suspected. Not only did Democrats selectively cherry-pick 3 emails, but they distorted their true meaning by redacting these emails. Now, I want you to see what Democrats released so that you can see what liars they are. This email is dated April 2nd from way back in 2011 from Jeffrey Epstein to the now jailed Ghislaine Maxwell. And the email says, quote, "I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump." And instead of the person's name, they put in the word victim. Victim spent hours at my house with him and has never once been mentioned. End quote. So Democrats are pretending here that they have something new by releasing this email from way back in 2011 and pretending that it says something significant by deceptively redacting it. And the name of the victim who the Democrats redacted from this email was Virginia Giuffre. And instead of Virginia's name, Democrats deceptively inserted the word victim, implying that this was a victim of Trump. And there was no reason to redact the name other than to deceive. The name was not redacted for national security purposes or to protect the victim or anything like this. Democrats just wanted to deceive, wanted to lie to the American people again. And this just once again shows what liars the Democrats are, along with their collaborators in the propaganda news. Because if they had just left Virginia's name in the emails without redacting her name, everybody would have known instantly that these emails in no way implicate Trump in any wrongdoing. In fact, if Virginia's name had not been redacted, this would have just reminded everyone that Virginia has repeatedly, under oath, testified that Donald Trump never did anything wrong, never so much as flirted with her, and that she never saw Donald Trump on the Epstein Island and never saw him do anything inappropriate with any female, much less an underage female. And Virginia Giuffre was working at Donald Trump's club, Mar-a-Lago, in 1999 or 2000 when she was 17 years old. Specifically, she was working in the spa area of the club where she was greeting guests and handing guests towels and whatnot. In a 2016 deposition, Virginia testified that Trump, quote, "didn't partake in any sex with us and never flirted with me," unquote. She also said this in her grand jury testimony. And Ghislaine Maxwell recruited Virginia at the Mar-a-Lago club. She saw her there and recruited her to work for Jeffrey Epstein as a traveling masseuse. And this was in 1999 or 2000. Ghislaine Maxwell, remember, was Epstein's partner and girlfriend in this enterprise. She was recruiting Epstein's girls for him. Ghislaine Maxwell, by the way, is the daughter of British billionaire media tycoon Robert Maxwell, who died mysteriously in 1991 by falling off his yacht. And it's pretty well established that Robert Maxwell was an asset of British intelligence and Israeli intelligence. Sadly, Virginia Giuffre was found dead in her home on April 25th, 2025. The official ruling was that she eliminated herself, but no details were given. Did she use sleeping pills? A gun? We're not told. Her father and many others have expressed doubts that she eliminated herself, especially since she had just received a financial settlement of $16 million from Prince Andrew. Most people don't just eliminate themselves after they receive $16 million. So that seems pretty strange. And Virginia's memoir, titled Nobody's Girl, was published after her death. And in her book, she once again states that Donald Trump did nothing inappropriate that she saw, never treated her inappropriately, behaved as a perfect gentleman to her. In her book, Virginia describes being introduced to Trump before Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein enter her life. Virginia writes in her book, quote, "Trump couldn't have been friendlier, telling me it was fantastic that I was there," end quote. And Virginia's book is actually very interesting. I just started reading it. I've gone through every mention of Trump in her book, and there's absolutely nothing incriminating about Trump in her book. In fact, the opposite. She describes Trump as a perfect gentleman. And I've been following Trump for decades, and I just don't think he's into underage girls. That's just not his thing. He's into supermodels and very attractive adult women. That's true. In a second email dated January 31, 2019, Epstein writes this to a Trump-hating writer named Michael Wolff. And this email states, quote, "Of course he knew about the girls and asked Ghislaine to stop." And keep in mind that this email was in 2019, a few months before Epstein was arrested and then found dead in his jail cell. So Epstein is claiming here that Trump knew about the girls and asked Ghislaine to stop approaching girls at his club at Mar-a-Lago. So yeah, when Trump found out that Epstein was sexually harassing girls, sexually harassing underage girls at Trump's club in 2007, he banned Epstein from his club. If Epstein had anything damaging on Trump, Trump would not have felt free to have just discarded Epstein from his social circle and banned him from his club. Epstein, after all, was running a blackmail business. That was his business. And I believe he was conducting blackmail operations for the CIA and for Israeli intelligence. He was a freelance blackmailer. And I get into that in this video here. But Epstein was not able to snare Trump in his honeypot blackmail schemes. If he had anything on Trump, he would have had leverage over Trump. That's his game. That's his business. But Epstein didn't have any leverage over Trump because he didn't have any damaging information about Trump. Jeffrey Epstein was a member of Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach, Florida. Both had residences in Palm Beach. And yes, Trump and Epstein were friends at one point. Trump partied with Epstein. They were friends in the 1990s and the early 2000s. We know that Trump flew on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet on 7 occasions, going back and forth between Palm Beach and New York City. But Trump always had family members with him when he was flying on Epstein's jet. And it was just for the purpose of going back and forth between Palm Beach and New York City. Trump was never on Epstein's notorious island. Donald Trump banned Jeffrey Epstein from his Mar-a-Lago club in 2007 when he learned that Epstein was sexually harassing a teenage girl who was the daughter of a club member. And this was before Jeffrey Epstein's first sex trafficking conviction in 2008. A third email that Democrats released is dated December 2015. And this email was from a rabid anti-Trump writer named Michael Wolff to Jeffrey Epstein. And this email states, quote, "I hear CNN is planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in scrum afterwards. If we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be? You could hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt," end quote. So what this anti-Trump journalist is doing, frankly, this discredited journalist, Michael Wolff's books have been filled with basically lies. But what Wolff is doing here, this left-wing writer, is plotting with Epstein on how to blackmail Trump. With this email out there, I don't see how any publisher could publish a Michael Wolff book again. The guy's a complete fraud. But this email tells me that they didn't have anything on Trump. This email doesn't implicate Trump in anything at all. It does the opposite. Wolff is basically asking Epstein if he has anything on Trump. And we knew that Epstein for years had been trying to get his hooks into Trump, unsuccessfully. He was always trying to ingratiate himself with Trump and get into Trump's inner circle. Epstein was a member of Trump's Mar-a-Lago club there in Palm Beach, until Trump got wind of what Epstein was up to and so banned him from the club in 2007. And this 2015 email from Michael Wolff shows they had absolutely nothing on Trump. Michael Wolff is wondering what Epstein might have on Trump, and apparently nothing. We've known for many years that Trump and Epstein were good friends in the 1990s and early 2000s. Nothing whatsoever is new about that. Epstein was friends with lots of people, a lot of powerful people and wealthy people. That was his business. He was in the business of blackmailing powerful and wealthy people. And I believe on behalf of the CIA and on behalf of Israeli intelligence. We know that Microsoft founder Bill Gates spent a lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein, and it appears that Bill Gates' marriage with Melinda Gates broke up over this. Melinda Gates divorced Bill Gates when Gates' friendship with Epstein became worldwide news in 2019. Bill Gates probably told Melinda that he was somewhere else when he was actually with Epstein. And Melinda Gates does say in her memoir that Bill Gates' friendship with Jeffrey Epstein contributed to their divorce. Apparently, she didn't know much about that. Other famous Epstein guests include President Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, the Victoria's Secret magnate, Les Wexner, President Clinton's National Security Advisor, Sandy Berger, President Clinton's Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers, Bill Clinton's Energy Secretary and former Governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson, Joe Biden's CIA Director, William Burns, former Democrat Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell, billionaire investor Ron Burkle, and many others. Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Barak was on Epstein's private jet 43 times. Barak was also Israel's defense minister and heavily tied in with Israeli intelligence. So yeah, Trump and Epstein were friends, but they had a falling out over several issues. Their first falling out occurred in 2004 when Trump won a bidding war against Epstein for a property in Palm Beach. And according to the Washington Post, Epstein was furious about this, and he vowed revenge against Trump. And then just 2 weeks after this auction, Palm Beach police received their first tip that led to the start of an investigation into Epstein's abuse of underage girls. And many believe that it was Trump who urged the cops to look into Epstein. So it probably is true that Trump got wind of Epstein's abuse of underage girls and then alerted police about it, which is why Epstein hated Trump so much. And let's not forget that it was Trump's FBI, the FBI when Donald Trump was president, that arrested Jeffrey Epstein in 2019. So this email from Michael Wolff means absolutely nothing, means less than nothing. And the only way that the Democrats can possibly even successfully imply wrongdoing by Trump is to redact the name Virginia Giuffre from the emails. Because Virginia had already testified repeatedly under oath and wrote in her memoir that Trump was a perfect gentleman whenever she saw him, did nothing inappropriate. In other words, the Democrats are purposefully deceiving the American people. Because once we know that the victim here, the redacted name of the victim, is in fact Virginia Giuffre, we know for a fact that this email in no way implicates Donald Trump in any wrongdoing. In other words, this is just another Democrat political hoax in their long list of Get Trump political hoaxes. Democrats cherry-picked these 3 emails to release out of more than 23,000 additional documents that they had gotten from the Epstein estate. And then they had to redact the email and hide the identity of the person in order to make the email look damaging to Trump. So this seems to be the best they have on Trump. We also have the attorney for the victims, for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. He said in 2009 that Donald Trump was very helpful in the investigation into Epstein. He said that Donald Trump was the only high-profile figure to actually be helpful in the investigation.
Everyone, this is Derek, and we're here at the Palm Beach County Courthouse. Just wrapped up the civil trial dealing with Mr. Bradley Edwards, attorney who's represented many of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. First off, thank you so much for your work and for everything you've done.
Absolutely, you're welcome.
This goes to the more salacious rumors, but I would like you to just, whatever you can say on it. In your opinion as a lawyer and your experience, is there anything you can say as to the validity of those claims or whether or not there will be any more about that?
Nothing at all. The only thing that I can say about President Trump is that he is the only person who, in 2009, when I served a lot of subpoenas on a lot of people, or at least gave notice to some pretty connected people that I wanted to talk to them, he is the only person who picked up the phone and said, let's just talk. I'll give you as much time as you want. I'll tell you what you need to know, and was very helpful in the information that he gave, and gave no indication whatsoever that he was involved in anything untoward whatsoever, but had good information that checked out and that helped us, and that we didn't have to take a deposition of him.
And that was in 2009?
That was in 2009.
And here we have Jeffrey Epstein communicating with President Barack Obama's former Deputy White House Counsel, Kathy Rummeler, in 2018 about how to dirty up Donald Trump. He was talking here in 2018 about the case for impeaching Trump. In other words, Jeffrey Epstein was neck deep in Democrat efforts to take down Trump. So if he had anything on Trump having to do with underage girls, Epstein would have been sharing this information with the Democrats. But he had nothing. Now here's Democrat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett talking on CNN about the supposed bombshell the Democrats have on Trump. Now Jasmine Crockett is basically just a professional moron. There's no one dumber in Congress than Jasmine Crockett, which is saying a lot because there are a lot of really stupid people in Congress. Congress is chock full of complete morons. And surprisingly, CNN calls her out here.
This is an email from April 2nd, 2011. Republicans were saying that victim is Virginia Giuffre. As you know, she died by suicide. She's been very outspoken victim of Jeffrey Epstein. Here's the email right here on your screen. She wrote a book, as you know, and she did not accuse him of any wrongdoing. What do you make of that? And can you confirm that?
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, it's redacted who the victim is, so I won't necessarily take the Republicans' word.
No, it wasn't Republicans. It was Democrats who were the ones who redacted Virginia's name.
On who it is that's redacted. And I don't know why they would necessarily redact someone's name who is deceased at this point.
The Democrats did that, though. The Democrats redacted.
No. I understand.
Okay,
but I'm just saying, like, our biggest concern is to actually make sure that we are protecting victims.
Protecting the victims? Virginia's deceased. She wrote a memoir about this. Moving on.
And obviously, she wrote a book. She told her truth.
She told her truth? That's what people say when they're flat out lying. She told her truth. Are Democrats complete and total morons? Well, the answer is that these Democrats don't care at all about the truth or doing good for the country. All they care about is winning. All they care about is regaining political power so they can castrate your kids and reopen the border to let in tens of millions more future Democrat voters. That's all they care about, and they'll do whatever it takes to achieve this. None of this has to make any sense. It's all about smearing Trump. Look, blue states were willing to lock down their economies during the COVID hoax in 2020 to win that election. They didn't care how many small businesses they bankrupted or how many childhoods they wrecked. There's only one goal for these Democrats, and right now it's to get Trump. But if it was some other Republican in the White House, they'd be trying the same thing. Get whoever the Republican president is, because their goal is to win permanent political power. And their primary strategy for doing this is to reopen the border, to create tens of millions of new voters for Democrats, so that a Republican never again has a chance to win the presidency. They want to lock in permanent political power for Democrats, turn America into a one-party country. And President Trump is trying to prevent that from happening. Now, do I think Donald Trump handled the Epstein matter poorly? Yeah, you bet I do. First, Donald Trump said he was going to release the Epstein files. Then he changed his mind and said he wasn't going to release them. So yeah, that's weird. Not a good look. But if the Biden regime had anything damaging on President Trump, they had 4 years there, and Trump was running for election again, don't you think the Biden regime would have released any damaging information they had on Trump? Here's what Stephen A. Smith had to say about that.
Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind that the Epstein files were in existence and free to have been opened during the Biden administration. You were there for 4 years. How come you didn't open it as a Democratic Party then? What am I missing? I'm not saying I know. It's a legitimate question. Maybe I don't remember the answer. Maybe my extraordinary producers should be able to help me during the commercial break. But from my understanding, the same files that were open or being open now with the 220 pages of documents or whatever it is, with various emails, that could have been done when Biden was in office. Well, why didn't you do it? If it's so important now, what were the Democrats doing at that particular moment in time? Because my attitude is just deducing how much they despise Trump is if there was some real bona fide dirt on him, since you went after him with the 34 felony convictions, which essentially was deduced to him paying hush money to Stormy Daniels, a porn star, just so she wouldn't reveal their happenings with one another leading up to the election in 2016. Okay? If you had something like that you were willing to parade him through the streets with Of course, if you had something on him about Epstein, you'd have let it go earlier to make sure he didn't become the 47th president. That's just my thinking from a logical perspective. But what do I know?
Also, former Attorney General William Barr, whose Justice Department arrested Jeffrey Epstein, testified under oath before the House Oversight Committee that he never saw anything that would implicate Trump in Epstein's crimes, and that the Biden regime would have released any damaging information that they had on Trump, if they had any. I can't show you Barr's testimony here because it was behind closed doors. But here's a transcript of his testimony. And William Barr, by the way, is not pro-Trump. He had a falling out with President Trump. William Barr is a longtime deep stater. Also, I keep finding myself agreeing more and more with Democrat Senator John Fetterman, who seems to be the only honest Democrat in the Senate.
And Senator, good morning. We should get you on the top story of the day, the Epstein emails released yesterday. Give us your reaction to what you did read yesterday, and also what do you hope happens next? What else do you want to see make the light of day?
I think what's going to happen is it's entirely appropriate. Release everything, release all of them. Another one of my questions is we sat on those for 4 years too. So, I don't really understand, either. There are a lot of questions. So when everything is released and everything comes out, and then we'll have a more full picture of exactly what's involved in all of these kinds of things. So, yes, I do believe there will be enough votes to release those files, and then we can have the opportunity to absorb all of it, the totality of it.
Yeah, I agree that the files should be released. And I think we're going to find a lot of powerful people implicated by the Epstein files. Republicans and Democrats. But not Trump. If Trump were in any way implicated in the Epstein files, we would have found out by now. Now, my theory on why Donald Trump changed his mind, first said he was going to release the Epstein files, then said he wasn't going to release the Epstein files, is that Jeffrey Epstein was a CIA asset, was also an Israeli intelligence asset. He was conducting blackmail operations on behalf of both the CIA and Israeli intelligence. He was also laundering money for the CIA. He was an expert on money laundering. And I think that's why Trump changed his mind about releasing the Epstein files. If the files are released, if the Epstein files are released, and I think they should be released, this exposes the CIA's blackmail operations. Also the Israeli blackmail operations, along with Epstein's money laundering operations on behalf of the CIA and on behalf of Israeli intelligence. That's my belief, and there's a lot of evidence to support this. I think it's pretty much the consensus view now. And just think about it logically for a moment. If Trump is implicated in any way in any wrongdoing by the Epstein files, why would he have been for releasing the Epstein files until recently? He never would have supported release of the Epstein files if he were implicated in something wrong. But he suddenly changed his mind when he was shown what was in the Epstein files. And I don't think it had anything to do with him. Releasing the Epstein files would have exposed the CIA's blackmail operations to the world. And I'm sure that many powerful people, Republicans, Democrats, foreign leaders, bankers, and corporate kingpins were ensnared in Epstein's honeypot blackmail operations. It's how the CIA gets leverage over people. We know, for example, the meaning of this painting that Jeffrey Epstein had of Bill Clinton hanging in the foyer of his Manhattan residence. And I love this segment from Joe Rogan on this painting because it explains perfectly how the CIA operates.
Why do you think Epstein had that giant painting of Bill Clinton in a dress in his foyer? That painting is like, I got you, bitch. That's what that is.
Oh, right.
You got a president who was on the flight logs 26 times with Epstein, and you got that guy in a fucking dress in your house.
That is terrifying.
That's terrifying. Imagine if I knew some horrible dark secrets about you and you came over my house and I have a giant painting of you right when you walk into the front door.
Yeah.
Of you in a dress.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, buddy.
Hi, welcome.
Yeah.
You're right.
How fucking terrifying that would be.
That's terrifying.
I mean, you walk right in and bam, there's that painting.
And now you kind of control a president.
Holy shit, dude.
Holy shit. It's
well, that's
crazy.
100% what they were doing. 100% what they were doing.
Dude, I just don't even want to think about it. I don't want to think about all the, like, entities we'll never even know about that ride presidents around like a fucking horse. They just gallop around on them, just riding them around. We got another president. We did it. We lassoed another one. And that is so crazy to think about. Like a president who is being extorted. I think you're right, but god damn, that's sinister. Our understanding of democracy as like the president represents the people, it's like totally wrong. That in fact, it's potentially someone being controlled by people you'll never meet or maybe never even knew existed. Ugh.
They would never, if you had an enormous organization that controls everything, you control everything in the country, would you really let a new person just run it every 4 years in whatever way they like?
Right.
Wouldn't you, if you're there forever, you're there forever. You're not there for 4 years. Wouldn't you make sure over time that you secured enough control that the president really is just sort of a figurehead?
Now we know that Jeffrey Epstein visited the White House 17 times when Bill Clinton was president. And Epstein was deeply involved in President Clinton's Chinagate scandal. We also know that Jeffrey Epstein's liaison at the White House during the Clinton presidency was a guy named Mark Middleton, who was found dead hanging from a tree with a shotgun blast through the chest. It was ruled that Mark Middleton eliminated himself. So how does that work? You're hanging from a tree and you have a shotgun blast through the chest, but you eliminated yourself? And here's another very interesting email from Jeffrey Epstein dated May 25th, 2016. Epstein is writing to Michael Wolff, and Epstein writes, quote, "Hillary doing naughties with Vince," end quote. Epstein is referring here to Vince Foster, who is President Bill Clinton's deputy White House counsel. Foster had also been a personal lawyer for the Clintons, and his primary job was to handle the Whitewater scandal that involved the Clintons. And pretty much everyone connected with the scandal either ended up in prison or dead. And indeed, Vince Foster, who Epstein says was banging Hillary, was found dead on July 20th, 1993, with a gunshot wound to the head. And I cover the Clinton body count in this video here. And there are many, I would say 50 or 60, mysterious deaths, convenient deaths of people associated with the Clintons during that period. And I'll do a more complete video on all that at some point. Vince Foster was one of them. Mark Middleton was one of them. Jeffrey Epstein is one of them. And there are 50 or 60 more. Most were either murdered or died in accidents or eliminated themselves. And I'll be coming out soon with a full deep dive video on Jeffrey Epstein, the rise of Jeffrey Epstein, and how his blackmail and money laundering operation worked and how he got rich. He was a financial criminal. He was also working for the CIA and for Israeli intelligence. The CIA has a long history of doing business with organized crime and criminals. And I put out this video a few months ago on Jeffrey Epstein and how we know with 100% certainty, I think with 100% certainty, that Jeffrey Epstein did not eliminate himself. He was a CIA operative who knew too much and had to be disposed of. That's my opinion. And there's a lot of evidence to support that. So no, I don't think that Jeffrey Epstein had anything on President Trump. He hated Donald Trump because Donald Trump turned Epstein into the police and worked with the FBI. Donald Trump is how the police and the FBI found out about Epstein. And then the Trump Justice Department arrested Epstein in 2019. And that wouldn't have happened if Epstein had anything damaging on Trump. And now Democrats see that there's these ridiculous emails that they released aren't having the desired impact. Democrats are pretty much getting mocked for this so-called evidence. So now Democrats have released this new email from Jeffrey Epstein where Epstein says that Trump is a bad person. This email is dated February 8, 2017 to Larry Summers, who was President Bill Clinton's Treasury Secretary. It says, quote, "I've met some very bad people and none as bad as Trump. Not one decent cell in his body. So yes, dangerous," end quote. Okay, so let me get this straight. This is Jeffrey Epstein accusing Trump of being a bad person. Jeffrey Epstein is saying this. It's almost impossible to be a worse person than Jeffrey Epstein. But Democrats, for some reason, think we should be listening to Jeffrey Epstein as an authority on moral character? You really can't make this stuff up. So this is the so-called bombshell that's being ballyhooed by Democrats and the propaganda news? Really? This is the best they have? This is their bombshell? But also, Democrats are contradicting their own narrative. On the one hand, Democrats are saying that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were pals, best friends, so that means Trump is a bad person. On the other hand, they're saying that Jeffrey Epstein hated Donald Trump, which means that Donald Trump is a bad person. So which is it? The truth is, Jeffrey Epstein hated Donald Trump ever since Donald Trump turned him into the police. So let me get this straight. With the release of the Epstein emails, we found out that Epstein hated Trump, didn't trust him, they weren't friends. After Bradley Edwards, the lawyer for the accusers, said that Trump was the only individual to cooperate and help, Epstein said that Trump didn't have one decent cell in his body. This was all so compelling that the Democrats faked the redaction of a supposed victim's name. The name they blocked was Virginia Giuffre, who publicly testified that Trump was innocent. Democrats just keep throwing as much mud as they can at Trump and hope something sticks. First, they tried to derail his presidential run in 2016 by coming up with the Russiagate hoax. When that didn't work, they launched a 2-year Mueller-Russia hoax investigation in an effort to get Trump on something. They just figured if they fished around for 2 years, they'd find something illegal that Trump had done. But they found nothing. So then Democrats launched 2 impeachment hoaxes that included the January 6th hoax. Then Democrats managed to win the 2020 election by launching the COVID pandemic hoax, which locked down much of the economy. They then tried to put him in prison in multiple jurisdictions for fake crimes based on made-up law. They tried to bankrupt his family, tried to kill him twice. So now Democrats are trying this incredibly lame new hoax. And I think actually these emails show that Trump is not as bad a guy as a lot of people thought. Democrats keep investigating him and finding nothing. They've been investigating him since 2015. So I think that President Trump changed his mind about releasing the Epstein files because the CIA told him that if you do that, this will expose the CIA's blackmail and extortion operations. This has been standard practice by the CIA since World War II. No country would ever trust the U.S. again if they knew how dirty the CIA really is. On this theme, I hope you'll check out my series on how and why the CIA killed JFK. I imagine the CIA had a talk with him. I don't know about what, or what threats might have been made. But the CIA works like organized crime. It is organized crime. First, it tries friendly persuasion. If that doesn't work, blackmail. If that doesn't work, they kill you. If you're not moved by that, they threaten your family. President John F. Kennedy threatened to dismantle the CIA when he found out what the CIA was doing. So the CIA killed him. His brother Bobby, RFK, also threatened to dismantle the CIA. And RFK was on the way to win the Democrat nomination for president in 1968. So the CIA killed him, in my opinion. And I think all this is pretty provable, as I think I do in my series on the assassination of JFK. So yeah, I believe that the CIA probably had a talk with President Trump, and so President Trump changed his mind about releasing the Epstein files. Well, that's all I have for you today. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, comment. Also hit the notifications button, because that's how we overcome suppression by the algorithm, because the suppression is real. Be sure also to follow me on X. I'm posting there all the time. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you back here next time.